So, good evening. My name is Latavia Alexander, and today this is the second installment of the Legacy Conversation series. If you have not been to one of the webinar or one of these sessions before, the goal is to really to just get the conversation started. The goal of tonight would be to share some information. I will give a very brief overview of estate planning in general, but tonight we're really going to focus on wills, just kind of what is required for a will to be valid. And I have my friend and financial advisor here, Jhakiri Brooks, who is very much experienced, very knowledgeable financial advisor who he has helped me and my family. And so he's here to add to the conversation, share some of his expertise and experience. And then we'll talk to as well as how he and I have worked together, but more specifically about how an estate planning attorney and your financial advisor can and should work together for your estate planning. And I should just give a little background on myself. I have been practicing for about 12 years now, doing a variety of things, but my passion area is legacy and working with individuals as well as entrepreneurs to help them to establish and protect their legacy. And so that comes in many different shapes and forms. But that is the idea behind this legacy conversation series. And so, Jhakiri, I'm going to give you some time to introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about you and your background.
Absolutely, everybody. How are you? My name is Jhakiri Brooks. I laugh because I am what I like to call a New York Carolinian, meaning I am originally from a small town in North Carolina called Rocky Mount, but originally I moved to New York back in 2008. I've been here, 2004. I've been in New York for well over 20 years now. Basically became an adult in New York, but I always like to make the joke that the reason why I became a financial planner is because I did not want to hear anymore that being Black was synonymous to being impoverished. And funny enough, even with the spirit of the holiday we're celebrating today, the remembrance of 9/11, I think this is the perfect conversation to have because think about those families who lost folks, but they had things in place. But then we have our families who are trying to get things in place. So for us, I know things are emotional, things are tough, but my most important thing is to make sure that these conversations are very household and comfortable for the most part. Thank you, Batavia.
All right, thank you. So like I said, we'll jump right in. This is designed to be a conversation. So yes, we will be sharing information, but by no means is this a lecture. If you have questions, please feel free to come off mute and ask the questions throughout. We will definitely reserve some time at the end for questions, but like I said, let's make this a conversation. So as I stated, I want to just give a very quick overview of estate planning, or as I like to call it, legacy planning, and then we'll dive into wills. And so growing up, Jhakiri, you alluded to this, but I always just think of estates or estate planning as just it was something for rich white people or very wealthy, and it was not something that I thought of as was for me or attainable by me. And thankfully, I have have learned and know better that it is for everyone. And so I like to think of estate planning or legacy planning as it's it's developing a plan. It's putting together a plan for how you want things to go while you were alive, and specifically, or more specifically, once you've passed away. Like, who do you want to, how do you want your family to be taken care of? What assets do you want to leave to them? Who do you want to have what? So it's literally just the organization of assets and developing a plan. And that plan should be just that, a plan, and comprehensive. And so it can include a will, a power of attorney, advanced medical directive. You could have a trust-based plan. It also includes making sure that you have various retirement accounts or accounts with designated beneficiaries, and you make sure that those are updated as well as with instruction. So if you are including in your plan people who are or maybe minors at the time that you pass, you want to make sure that you have designated a person to be their their guardian, or to be responsible for those assets that you're leaving to them until they are of age or in a position to be able to manage them for themselves. And so, like I said, today we're going to focus on wills. And so with wills, what it is, it's a document, it's a legal document where you write out and express your wishes and desires for what you want to have happen. And I'm sure we've all seen a show or a movie where there's the big reading of the will. So I want to first kind of just address some possible myths or misconceptions that people have about that will reading. Most states that is not required that you call everybody together for the formal reading of the will. That's just something that some people, that is their desire. They want to do that a bit for the, I guess, a bit of the dramatic effect, or they know that there's going to be a lot of things contested. But it's a written document that spells out your intentions. And so there's a will can have a variety of things, but there are four primary components of a will. And that would be that it's includes the testator, that's the person who's making the will. So you'll hear it say the testator or testatrix if you're talking about a woman, but really it's the person who's making the will. So you want it to establish the information. It needs to say this is the last will and testament of, if we're talking of Latavia. It needs to declare their intent. And so this is my last will and testament. I intend for this to be my will. I want to make sure that any previous wills or documents are now void, and this one is the controlling document. And then you need to make sure that it designates or outlines who you want to be the beneficiaries, who you want to, if it's real property, who you want to leave that to. So it's broken down. Usually you're talking about your real property. So that would be houses or land, like houses or land. Then tangible or personal property, that would be things of cars, jewelry, art collection, who's getting grandma's pots and pans, those types of things. You want to make sure that's laid out. And then the last primary component is it needs to state the essentially who you are appointing to be your executor or personal representative. And that's the person that you're designating to be responsible for making sure that your wishes are carried out. Some states use executor, like North Carolina, it's executor. In Maryland, it's personal representative, but they mean the same thing. The function is the same. And so, like I said, I'm just gonna kind of walk you guys through. So we said at the beginning, you have to usually, if we go back to the example of movies where they talk about it, where they do that will reading, it'll say the last will and testament of so-and-so. Um, Latavia Alexander, being sound mind and body, I do make this will, and I intend for it to be the ruling will. And then it goes into, you want to make sure that you identify yourself. So it would be a resident. For me, it would be a Maryland resident. And then identifying any family members. And the important part of this is because, for example, if you're married, you want to make sure that you identify the spouse. If you have children, you identify them, because that way, if there is, let's say you have decided you do not want to leave your children something, or you're choosing to not, to leave your children out of the will. You want to make sure that you clearly state that, so that way, if there are any challenges when you pass away, that minimizes the likely success of a challenge to your capacity at the time, because that is one of the requirements for it to be valid, is you have to be of sound mind and body, and able to create a will, or essentially being able to enter into a contract. So it's who you are, who your family members are, and what your wishes are. And now the exact form and how those are written, it really is more so about your preference. There is not a specific type of language that needs to be used. The primary thing is you want to make sure that it is clear and succinct, and that the person reading it, who has to carry out those wishes, they know what you want. So that's the components of the will. And then some things to keep in mind that are not, so with the will, when you pass away, it goes through the probate process. And probate is where you go to the court and say, hey, this person has passed away. They created a will. They said this is what they want to have happen. They submit that to the court. You open what's called an estate is opened. And then the court helps the personal representative or executor facilitate the process of distributing those assets. So the thing to keep in mind is, as important as the will is, there are certain assets that do not pass in the will. So whether you write it in there or not, it's not going to pass. And this is where one of the big areas where Jhakiri comes in, his role as a financial advisor comes in. So some examples of the things that do not pass through the will, that would be life insurance, retirement accounts, pension plans, if you have investment accounts, those types of things do not typically, they're not automatically going to pass through the will. So even if you write in your will, I want to leave my life insurance proceeds, I want to leave them to my mom,
Mhm.
but if my life insurance documents do not have my mother listed as a beneficiary, it does not matter what it says in the will, it's going to go to the person listed as the beneficiary. So I'm going to pause here and I'm going to turn it over to you, Hakiri, so you can talk about
Absolutely.
some of those assets and the importance and benefit of them.
Before
Absolutely.
you, excuse me, before he speaks, I just want clarification. You mentioned earlier about a representative. You want to make sure you have someone to make sure that the will is carried out the way
Mhm.
it's stated. So just hypothetical, who would make sure our will is carried out?
You mean you and you and your husband?
Yes.
So, okay, no, that's a good question. So in your will, let's say you've listed your husband as your personal representative. In the event that
Mhm.
it's written in the thought that if you pass before he does. So if he's listed as your personal representative, when you pass away, he is the person responsible for carrying out those wishes. Vice
Mhm.
versa, in his will, you were listed as the personal representative. And so if he passes before you are the person listed. I believe there is a clause in both of your wills that says if in the event that there was to be where you both passed at the same time.
Now that's the question that I
Yeah.
was getting to.
Okay. So yeah, so there is a provision in your will that addresses what's called simultaneous death. So in the event that you were both to pass at the same time, both would be treated as though as the other predeceased you. And so in that instance, if you don't have an alternative personal representative listed, I'll just say in you all's case, it would most likely it would be me that would do that. But a way for more generally for people to address that is you can have a primary personal representative, or you can list two, or you can have it written to where there's an alternate. So my primary, I want uh in this case, you want Felix Alexander to be the executor of your estate. In the event that he is no longer alive or unwilling to serve in this capacity, I appoint Latavia Alexander or whomever it is. So you can list alternates in there to address that
Uh,
situation.
should that be included in the will?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Mama, can I jump in?
Sure.
All right, awesome. So, family, for where we are today, one of the most important things I always like to make a joke about is when we think about estate planning and financial planning, they actually go hand in hand. At the end of the day, I think of financial planning as you're preparing for life to live after you stop working, but estate planning is planning for life after you're gone. So when you think about the things that you have to take care of after you're gone, pretty much are the same exact things that you created on the way to there. So when we think about things such as first and foremost, like investments, when it comes to investments, you have different types of investments. Of course, you have different types of investment accounts. So when we think about retirement accounts themselves, you have things like 401ks, IRAs, all these different things out there. 401ks are sponsored by your job, IRAs you create for yourself. However, God forbid if you pass with no proper planning, what ends up happening is your family has to liquidate your 401k within a 10-year period. So of course, if you have a 401k and that account is not liquidated in that 10-year period, whatever you don't use goes right back to the government.
Ah,
So naturally, what ends up happening is even if you have retirement proceeds, it's very important, such as pensions, on the other hand, to make sure you market beneficiaries. But not all pension programs offer spousal benefits.
yeah, okay.
So you want to make sure that when you go through your 401k paperwork, your employment paperwork, that you're honestly, number one, updating your beneficiaries actively. And number two, making sure you understand where your assets should go when God forbid you're passing. And that's not me saying, of course, your 401k can't go through your estate plan. So you got to make sure that you're putting these things into the possession of people you truly trust. So of course, I tell people all the time, if you know Aunt Susie ain't that cool, but Aunt Candy is decent, I'm going with Aunt Candy. I trust her with the money. right? Because at the end of the day, when you have children, property, all these different things, you need to make sure that you are entrusting the person who you know who will act as if they are you.
Mm.
And that is so important because at the end of the day, we know we have family, we have distant friends. Even distant friends sometimes can become your, your beneficiaries, all these things, because the reality is you got to just make sure that person is going to meet you where you are. Now, I'll tell you, my second thing is home ownership. I'm not sure if you're going to get there today,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
but even thinking about things such as home ownership, homes, stocks, all receive what we call a step up in basis. This is taxes for y'all real quick, okay? Estate planning, people ask me why I love estate planning. It's not because of the asset protection part, honestly speaking, it's because of the tax savings that it provides on your family after everything is all said and done. Are you guys familiar with how expensive estate planning taxes are? No, I don't have the exact number on hand, but estate planning taxes can really jump up as high as almost 50%. So if a person is taking everything, if a person goes through probate and the system decides to keep that money and they administer your estate for you, there's a lot of estate tax you're gonna have to pay up front. So imagine, of course, if you have a home and you decide to do with this home after it's gone, would you rather that home stay in your family's accounts or that home go to someone else or that home go to the state? Because once the state administers it, it's not fun anymore. My main thing for you guys is you want to make sure that you understand that if something happens to you today, the things that you provide for the people you leave behind, they will have a certain level of taxes based upon what happens. So with inherited property, you receive what we call a step-up basis. So what that means is you don't have to pay taxes on the gain that the person that I'm sorry, let me put this in proper English. Jesus, my apologies. It's always hard to explain. You got to put X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. So you have person X. Person X is the grandfather. Person Y is the grandchild. If person X buys a house in 1947 for $20,000, however, by the time they pass, God forbid, that home value increases to about $1 million. Let's say a person Y inherits that property and sells the property for $2 million. They will have to pay taxes on the $1 million gain because their property value started at $1 million, not 20,000. Now, Latavia, 20,000 to 2 million, I would never want to imagine having to pay that tax a day in my life. So first thing you want to know is that all assets receive a step-up basis. Even for example, if we have someone like Ms. Loris on the call, if Ms. Loris bought Apple stock in 2000 for $1, and of course, God forbid something would happen to her, what ends up happening, of course, is that her heirs or whoever she wants, when she sells that stock at $100, well, they pay taxes on the $100 that she had, not the dollar she bought it for. So when you think about estate planning, always consider too, what's the tax burden on my family?
Yeah, no, that is a great point. And thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, it is taxes. And that's one of the things, taxes, I always like to say, the government is always going to find a way to get their money or get some of our money. And so that is one of the other key benefits of having an estate plan, is because there are ways you can plan to maximize savings and to minimize tax costs. And that's where when you are doing your estate planning, if you're working with me and any other attorney, usually they're gonna, when you start there, you're gonna get like an intake form, and it's asking, okay, what are your desires? What are your goals? Okay, hey, we need to talk about your assets. What are your assets? Often, if you have a financial advisor or planner or someone that you're working with, you're gonna go to them and say, hey, help me understand what I have, and then how do we prioritize it? Or I may ask you to give me your financial advisor or planner's contact information, and then I'll work directly with them to get an understanding of what are the assets, what type of assets you have. So then that helps inform the plan. And so if you're someone who you do just, let's say you have life insurance and you have a retirement account through your employer, a will-based plan would still be ideal, because you just want to make sure, as he mentioned, that you have identified beneficiaries and you made sure that they're up to date, and it's someone that you trust to be responsible with that money. Because the thing about those accounts is, as much as you might desire that they use that money to take care of your children, or to use it, hey, I want you to put some of that to the side and use it to, pay off the house, or make sure there's money to cover education for the child. When you're gone and the insurance company releases those funds to that beneficiary, you no longer get to say what they do. It is theirs to do with how they please, and you just hope and pray that they will, be responsible with it. So if you have, if your assets are a bit more, if it's a smaller number of assets, or what we call more of a simple estate, a will-based plan is ideal. You just want to make sure that you have clear instructions. If you have a bit more of a more complex portfolio, that is where a trust-based plan might be a better option for you, because, and we'll get dig into trust in another session. But what I will say is, I like to describe a trust as, it's a bucket of money, or a bucket of assets. And so you create the trust and you put the various assets in that bucket, and then you designate a trustee. Typically people are creating revocable living trust. And so that means you create it while you're alive, and you can make any changes that you deem necessary while you are alive. And so if I create a trust, I'm gonna, like, the Alexander Trust, or in my case, the Phillips Trust. And then I put the house in the trust. And then if I have an IRA and I put that in the trust, then I'm the trustee, then I am in control of what happens to those assets. And so making sure that the IRA is growing, or if it's an investment account, it's growing and it's managing it. And then you designate a successor trustee, and that would be similar to how a personal representative works with, hey, when I pass away, or if I become incapacitated, this is the person that I'm designating to be in charge and responsible of the assets in this trust, to make sure, I don't know if you think of it as a standpoint, if we're talking about a bucket, if it's filled with water, I want to make sure that they're carrying this bucket and they're being careful enough to make sure there's no water is spilling out. If anything, we want to figure out how can we fill it up to expand it, but not to be reckless with it and waste. And so I would say use that same thought process when you're talking about designating a personal representative, because you want to make sure that they are going to be efficient with carrying out your wishes. Or if they know that, hey, this is just above, this is not my ministry, I need to hire someone, that they will do that. And yes, Dolores, you have a question?
Yes, sorry, I was looking for mute.
Oh,
I apologize. So if I'm understanding this correctly, so the trust, the concept of a trust is more so a living safeguard, right? Or a direction about what you want to have done with your assets if you are incapacitated, while a last will, that is what you want done after you have gone on. That so far correct, right?
Yes, that is correct. But the trust,
Uh-oh.
no, you are correct. It's the trust also can dictate what happens after you pass as well. That's the
So
only
that's, yep,
clarification.
that was exactly my question.
Okay.
Like, how do they intermingle, and what, because unfortunately recently I had a friend whose mom passed away suddenly, and they're going through some of this legal stuff with her estate and some parts of it. And she was a very organized woman, right? Everything was written down. There was a folder all labeled, tabbed out, but there was something as simple as a bank account that didn't have, let's say that didn't have one of the children's names on it. And I think that
Oh.
to be the representative, I guess her name wasn't on the account. And it was something as simple as, like, her last pension payment went into that account, and that those funds needed to be accessed to pay for something, right? Um and it became a little bit of a nightmare, because it was like the bank wasn't allowing no, her name was on the account, but it wasn't on there in some way. so that she was able to gain access to those funds and be able to liquidate that account and use it for what her mom had said she wanted the funds in her bank account used for should she pass away.
Okay, no, yes. So it sounds like the daughter may, I'm not sure how, but so one of the things that can be done to help avoid that or to allow you to gain access quicker is most banks allow you to create either a transfer on death or a payable on death designation to your bank account.
Okay.
What it does is it essentially allows you to create a beneficiary for that account. So in this
Right.
situation, when the person passes away, instead of having to wait and go through the probate process to gain
Mhm.
access to the account, you
Mhm.
go in with the copy of the certified copy of the death certificate and your
Right.
identification to say, hey, I know that they had this person, they listed someone as payable. I am that person. Here's, you call them, ask them, what is the documentation that you need? And then you're able to gain access to those funds. I won't say right away, but much sooner.
In
Having
a
to say,
reasonable amount of time.
yeah, what your friend is probably having to do now is actually go open the estate, and then have it, once the estate is open, the court will issue the letters of administration or the letter certifying her as the executor or personal representative that you
Mhm.
then take to the bank or that financial institution and show that they have the authority. But Jhakiri, I believe you have a little bit more, this is a little bit more in your wheelhouse in terms of how to set up. So I'm
Yeah,
speak
And
on.
of course, Dolores, I actually just sent you a message just now.
I
If you have any
see.
resources, I'll always send things over to you, no problem. But I always tell people is that financial planning, though it's the end of the road, I can always say it's perhaps the most important piece of a financial plan because people truly assume that they don't need it. Right. It does not matter if you have one car, one house, one toe, one foot. If anything you have that's in your possession, you want to make sure that stuff is being directed the right way. But of course, with it being the final step of your financial plan, it honestly should be done first, especially when you have children, especially when you have a house, the smallest thing, right? And of course, based upon the complexity of your estate plan, your estate planning doesn't have to be arm and a leg. Now we talk about that offline, Latavia, but depending on the complexity, right, it's the most important expense you're probably ever going to adopt, and that's before college for the kids. That's before all those things because again, you don't know when something can happen. We can talk about investing, saving money, putting all this money away, insurance planning, and things like that. Yeah, but we don't know what we can actually touch tomorrow. Therefore,
Correct.
if we can't touch it and our families can't touch it, it goes to the IRS, whether it be
Back to
a
the
house,
government.
exactly, whether it be a house, whether it
Mhm.
be your jewelry, it doesn't matter. It's gonna go. You ever seen those random yard sales or someone selling stuff on eBay randomly or one of those
Mhm.
big, I think when I was in Rocky Mount, we had something we call a stockyard. It would just be a bunch of old stuff from old folks
Mhm.
who God forbid had passed it at their homes.
Mhm.
So now your stuff is in a bargain deal. And these are real life examples, and people don't know this. And all it takes is just one single document, maybe three or four. Well,
Yeah.
one single document that just says, hey, if I go today, if I were to be gone yesterday, I need this cousin to get this account, this child to get this house, this,
Mhm.
that's how it has to be. And it's so important because I've seen what that has done. And this is
Mhm.
how serious it is because people think that life insurance is just for put me in the ground. That's the biggest misconception in our entire community.
Mhm.
If you look at any of our Caucasian, Asian counterparts, they're looking at life insurance as their main source of creating wealth for their families.
Mhm.
So when we're out here with these 50K, 20K policies, a person who's making $50,000, they're having $1 million policy.
Mhm.
People who are making, 100K have $3 million policies where they have 3 kids, right? I always tell people when you're young, apply for the maximum insurance because you're healthier then. So by the time comes when you have children or bodily changes happen, you don't have to apply for a substantial amount of insurance at that health rating. Insurance is discriminatory towards health and most importantly, age and gender. So naturally, when I speak about insurance, I'm making sure you understand this insurance needs to go to whoever's tied to your estate planning because there are going to be things in your estate plan that you cannot afford to take out with your own hard-earned cash. So naturally, if you have a good size life insurance policy, I don't care if it's term life, whole life, universal, whatever insurance you have is meant to help you with those estate planning expenses and taxes. When you die, immediately you can request from your insurance company a small amount just to cover the immediate expenses themselves. But I always
Makes
tell people,
sense.
insurance agents, they don't tell you that, unfortunately. They just want to get you a policy.
Mm-hmm.
My team, we make sure that you are bringing your financial plan full circle. We want to show you how your retirement connects to your insurance planning, how your insurance planning connects to your investment planning, how that's going to connect to your child's education too. Because so often people in our community, we don't look at planning together. It's like, oh, that's over here, that's at that company. No, you want to make sure you're building an entire team, the A team, your advisor, your attorney, and your accountant. Those are the three most important people to have in your team. You can throw a real estate agent in there too, but they cool. But you can throw a real estate agent in there too. But yes, you want to just make sure you have a system. Systems are so important because it's not about having all your planning at one company or anything like that. It's about making sure you have a centralized unit that, hey, I know if I call Jhakiri is going to call Latavia is going to call Anthony, and so on and so forth, rather than, darn, I got to connect my insurance guy, my investment guy, and I got to connect to my estate planning girl. It's too much connecting. Build a team out of it so everyone knows what's going on for you at all times.
I agree. I kind of feel like you preaching a little bit, but it's good preaching. But
I'm from the country.